Welcome to Ride On. I'm James Gross, and I am joined by my co-host, Julia Thane, back from somewhere and gone forever. All the readers want to know.
Yeah.
All the listeners want to know. All the viewers
The
want to know.
readers, the
Where has
listeners, the
Julia
viewers.
Thane been?
We need a little tracker, a little Carmen Sandiego tracker for me. Yeah, I have been on vacation. I went to Singapore and to Bali.
Is it? Great. That's where the common American goes for a vacation. That's great. This is not hashtag blessed at all.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Really? You're going to do that, James? Interesting. Okay. Let's see who gets canceled first from the show. It's probably not going to be me.
Well, how was Bali? How was Singapore?
Both were great. I mean, I was there for vacation, but me being me, I can't help out but do a little bit of transportation nerding out. So in Singapore, I rode public transit everywhere and I walked everywhere. And I found, honestly, the pedestrian experience wasn't what I expected it to be. It is a lot more highways there, like freeways and fast moving traffic than I expected, even though there are sidewalks and pretty nice sidewalks throughout. So that was one thing that was interesting to me about Singapore. And then the second part on Bali and my transportation nerding out is I'm really hoping my mom actually doesn't listen to this episode. But Mom, I'm sorry about this. I rode on a lot of backs of motorbikes in Bali. If you all have traveled to Asia, like Southeast Asia in particular, you might have used Gojek. It's incredibly helpful. It's like a Uber on steroids. And one of the things it allows you to do is ride hailing for scooters in particular. So honestly, what was awesome is I was there for a wedding. I found myself beating most of the other wedding guests to venues because I was riding on the back of a scooter. And I also had some pretty hilarious encounters in terms of being in my wedding formal wear and having to ride side saddle on a motorbike with a Balinese person driving. So it was all great fun.
Do they have a helmet for you?
They sure do. They don't smell particularly good, but yes, they do have a helmet.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's cool. And is the driver always wearing a helmet?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah. I like how James, do you need to put your safety vest on in order to ask these questions?
I mean,
yeah. Or do you want to have your construction helmet on in order to probe?
Curious on liability there, given it's kind of like an official app. I would imagine that has to happen, but I wasn't.
That's a great question. We should ask that to our guest later today, our insurance company representative. He might have the answer to that. Yep, he might have the answer to that.
And look at Julia, right back to business, already teasing out the episode. That's good, Julia. I appreciate that. So welcome back. We'll get right into this one. To start, before we get into a lot of news, because we've been off for a couple of weeks, so we'll keep you around a little bit longer this episode. Hopefully you like it. If you don't, let us know as well. But to start with a couple of announcements, we are incredibly excited to introduce the first round of speakers to Micromobility America, of course, happening in October in the San Francisco Bay Area. We put out a newsletter around this. You can see this at our website, micromobility.io. And so we've got a great list of names, including manufacturers, operators, brand policymakers, investors, media people, and again, like kind of a really cool cross-section from leaders in the world of the fire department in the U.S. to people talking about at the cutting edge of battery safety, both in the private market and the public market, as well as, of course, the best people in everything from scooters to e-bikes to neighborhood electric vehicles and more. So that initial speaker lineup is out, and look for more from us there. And then second announcement is we also have a giveaway from our friends at GoFlu, who I interviewed Julie Betts while Julia was gone. That was a great interview. You can check that out. We also have quite a few shorts out, but we're giving away both what Julie calls a body glower, which is sort of a jacket, as well as a bag. These are awesome, functional. I actually got myself some GoFlu gear that I wore this week with my family. And so I'm really excited that we'll be able to give that away. In order to win, you can leave a comment on YouTube and subscribe to the channel, as well as go over to ridereview.com and enter your email for your chance there. So that's it for the announcement. Julia, do you want to dive into the news for the week, or the last couple of weeks, I should say?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know how sometimes there are giveaways that you want to yourself subscribe to.
Mhm.
I feel like in this case, the GoFluo is mine. Like I want to put my name in for the GoFluo giveaway. So James, if you have anything left over in In-City Dust that you all can send up my way to LA, I'm all about wearing the GoFluo gear. Cool. So let's dive into the news. I'm going to go over 4 news stories this week. Some big things have been happening while I've been gallivanting around Bali, and also James has been out doing whatever James has been doing. The first news story is around enforcing traffic laws. 1 year after introducing its new 24/7 automatic traffic ticketing system, New York City has found that speed violations have dropped by 30%. It's really interesting, actually, to get this data from New York City because, as James and I have talked a lot about, automated traffic ticketing is something that's been debated in terms of being implemented in different cities across the U.S. for good reasons, for bad reasons, for equity reasons, has or has not been implemented. What New York City did is it's got about 2,000 traffic cameras across the city. Those cameras used to only operate from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. What they found is when they were able to operate those cameras 24/7, that they then saw speed violations drop. What that means is that New Yorkers are finally deciding to behave according to the traffic laws themselves, and this automated traffic ticketing system is helping them to do so. So, James, what do you think? Are we going to see this roll out in other cities, or is the data from New York not enough?
Yeah, I do think it's going to roll out in other cities, and I think it's great that New York, as probably the most important city in the U.S., continues to lead the way. So, a couple of funny stories here, Julia. One is there's this kind of great banter going around the internet while you were gone, which was the founder of The Wire, the very popular show on TV. David Simon, he tweeted out how he got a ticket actually from one of these cameras during the off hours. And it was in a school zone. And he said he was going 11 miles per hour over the speed limit. And he was just, so upset that he got this camera this ticket in July when school clearly isn't in session. Some people, of course, got after him about this comment. One, pointing out that 11 miles per hour over the speed limit is a pretty serious violation. And, it's a reason why you get a ticket. 2, a lot of people pointed out that a lot of kids are still actually in summer school. And they go to school for things like picking up their lunches, where a lot of New York City schools actually provide lunches for kids of lower income and other things like that. And then 3, street blogs, our friends over at Street Blogs went and actually did a little analysis because a lot of this data is actually public by license plate and found that David Simons actually has 11 speeding tickets in New York City. So not the best time necessarily to open your mouth. And again, kind of speaks to, Julia, something we've talked a lot about, which is this idea that, like, when it comes to the criminal justice system, there's a lot of people that just sort of think laws don't apply to them. I mean, we're living through the last 4 or 5 years where people, wanted to not enforce laws anymore in traffic. We've covered that quite a bit. And I think we have like this, and again, hopefully it's New York leading it, this sort of sane approach to how we're going to work in the future, which is, and again, this is a relatively American issue. This is not really an issue we're seeing around the world. I think it's like a bunch of quasi, people in bureaucratic positions decided they would stop enforcing traffic laws, and somehow it was just going to work out. And, and so I think this experiment's coming to an end, and I'm really glad to see New York leading the way.
Moving on to the next news story, in terms of New York City and the eBike trade-in program, what New York City has done, in addition to the automated traffic ticketing system, is start an e-bike trade-in program designed to help delivery workers swap low-quality, fire-prone bikes for safer, industry-certified models. Unfortunately, the program is off to a rocky start. It started in July, so let's just say it's been 2 months. But since July, only 3 bikes have been traded in. And experts are saying that the 60,000 plus delivery workers aren't participating, and they have any number of reasons: language barriers, cost of the trade-ins, a slow and somewhat difficult approval process. And so, I think what we're seeing is some of the policies in New York that are working well, some that are working more poorly. And just kind of sticking on this policy train, one other news story that's in this policy space is about the California Highway Patrol. They have been rolling out an e-bike training program, teaching riders the best safety practices, rather. These safety practices include things like maneuvering skills, rules of the road. The reason that this was rolled out is because of the growing number of bicycle-related crashes in California. There were more than 9,600 last year. And this is maybe a good question for you, James, to hop in on, and maybe we'll agree on this and maybe not. But what do you think? Is the state giving the resources to the right folks? Like, is the target audience for safety the e-bikers, or is it somebody else?
Well, two different stories here. I mean, in terms of the highway patrol, I think it's good. I think the more, I think from like a community perspective, the police are thinking about e-bike safety and working around e-bike safety. And again, a lot of people even look up to, like kids might look up to police and listen to them more than they would someone else. So I think it's a good effort. I applaud the idea of it. On the New York City e-bike trade-in program, again, this is something we've talked about a lot. And again, it's off to a very bad start, very bad start. And again, I think we've talked about this in line with like what CARB is trying to do here in California with their e-bike program. And, we've had Melinda Hansen on the podcast who runs the Equitable
Commute
Project. Yeah. And so, the New York Times is pulling a lot of punches as it relates to e-bikes. And this was kind of their latest hit. But I think the data is really bad. Like, we have to get these e-bikes off the street. And this program's not working. Seems like it's well-funded. What's going on? Who's accountable? How long do they have? What's plan B? Because plan A clearly isn't working. On the surface, I know there's been some talk of why it's not working. But on the surface, trying to get someone who's a delivery worker who has roughly a $400 to $600 bike to trade in their vehicle at a spot, disclose who they are, and trade it in for a vehicle that costs anywhere between $2,000 and $3,000. Like, on the surface, seems like a really bad program. And so I hope it's got to turn around. So it might just be that it needs to be turned over into other people's hands, because we do need to get these vehicles off the street. But yeah, this is a swing and miss. So whatever baseball analogy or you might want here, like hopefully we'll get another swing at it. But it's got to change. And again, similar to what we're seeing in California with like the CARB e-bike program, these incentive models are taking too long. They're too confusing. They're too kind of full of, I think, red tape, and they need to get a lot simpler. And I hope this is a case study in why things need to get simpler.
Yeah, just recognize that the process needs to be absolutely seamless for the person who's expected to engage in the process. I mean, if there's not going to be regulation around people not being able to have these low quality fire-prone bikes, and they're starting to be, but there's not that much, then, if you're going to do an e-bike trade-in program, it actually has to be an e-bike swap program. Like, there's got to be an incentive for somebody to do this where they get a better product for this, no price, essentially, by just trading in their own bike. So agreed with you that I think the policy design here is pretty flawed, and maybe is done within the constraints of what policy can do, but that's not done with the user in mind. So to be honest, I've actually been pretty embarrassed by the policies we've seen over the past few months, apart from the e-bike incentive programs, where I think that policymakers have just done kind of a shit job of saying that the e-bikers are the ones who need the re-education rather than the motorists, or charging e-bikers for things that really, like, motor vehicle drivers should be charged for, or not putting dollars towards putting in proper bike lanes, but instead saying, or even changing speeds of roads, but instead saying, like, let's put folks on different parts of the street. So again, I think there's some pretty embarrassing policy making that's happening right now, and I look forward to highlighting some of the better policy that ends up happening over hopefully the next coming months. So James, let me just talk about two business news stories before then turning over to you to talk about vehicle launches. The first one is one of your favorite topics of the past 6 months. So James, do you want to guess what I'm going to discuss?
Vanmoof.
Of course. Mm-hmm. James is already bored. James is so bored. So the topic at hand is that cult e-bike brand Vanmoof has been bought out of bankruptcy by Lavoie. Lavoie is a company that makes high-end scooters. They're based on McLaren applied Formula One technology. When Vanmoof went bankrupt earlier this summer, it left 190,000 riders in limbo. one of whom was actually my friend, and she refers to it as the diamond brick that she has in her backyard, that it like literally doesn't move at all now. It's just this this like leftover piece of hardware. In the article, it didn't say what the price of acquisition was. Lavoie's leader said that it spent tens of millions of dollars, so far less than the $180 million that Vanmoof had raised. But it did say that it's going to inject some stability into Vanmoof's operations. It's going to rely on third-party retailers for servicing and maintenance, and it hopes to get the products back up to speed. So, James, still bored? Is this interesting? Is this what you expected?
Yeah, I'd be curious how your friend's vehicle is bricked. Like, mine still works. Maybe it's got stuck in a software loop or something. So that's kind of interesting. But I'd say my Vanmoof has been running just fine. In terms of clearly we had Lavoie on a couple episodes ago, right? So it's he didn't mention this. I'm not sure exactly how long this has been in the works, so this kind of happened pretty quickly. And so I think it's great ultimately that see Lavoie back it up, and of course they have the funding from McLaren, so this is going to a bigger company for sure. I think my only comment would be I was really excited about Lavoie's scooter and how much they would go into really scooters as a main form factor and focus there. Clearly, Vanmoof is a very different form factor. So I'm curious to see, what that's like and how that might change their launch plans around the scooter, if it does. Because that's just very different. Now, again, maybe they think of it as like this is a sedan versus an SUV. I'm not sure. But I don't think there's a lot of good proof points of crossing over between scooters and bikes. So yeah, we'll have to see what this means for Lavoie.
Or they're ending up being a multimodal micromobility provider and trying to corner some kind of market, or think that there's the same customer, and so that they can just sell multiple vehicles to the same customer base. Is just one hypothesis. Okay, so final business news story. And this one is actually a really cool one. Kenya has revealed the details of an ambitious new plan to encourage electric motorbikes adoption. They're doing this through a manufacturing partnership with an African startup called Spiro. President Ruto, who's the president of Kenya, said that Kenya currently has 1,000 of the new bikes. There's another 10,000 on their way. And Spiro has established a plant in Kenya. They're going to be assembling up to 1,000 vehicles daily, which is pretty crazy. So in 10 days, they're going to have those 10,000 vehicles for Kenya, and hopefully be able to do much more business in the country. So again, think that this is super interesting. This goes with another one of my hypotheses that I repeat every episode, and James reminds me that I repeat every episode, which is that I think McKinsey has vastly underestimated the Latin American, Asian, and African markets, and I think they're going to grow at much higher clips than certainly we are in the U.S. and North America, and then even in Europe. And so I think that's actually where we're going to see the most growth, and where I think we should see the most companies pivoting. So James, before you go into vehicle launches, are you going to disagree with me, or are you going to agree with me?
I think what's juxtaposes first the, Equitable Commute Project program. And what I think is cool about this is is clearly a place and a policy that seems very ambitious, right? Like not just, coming out and saying, oh, let's do something. And like they're putting real numbers behind this, right? So we want 1,000 new bikes a day out of our plant. That's exciting. That's what I'd expect out of New York and New Yorkers and the culture of the U.S. And yet again, we're pointing to another policy where like there's no accountability, there's a lot of money, and like nothing's getting done. So I think this is again a trend we should watch with, specifically in the U.S., where a lot of policymakers doing a lot of talking and actually not getting anything done. And so to put the Equitable Commute Project on blast, and to put other projects on blast like CARB that we're seeing here in California, here's Kenya, who's saying we're going to ship 1,000 a day and watch us do it. So again, they need to do it, but at least that's a big number. They're putting it out there. It's not big. It's not virtue signaling. And that's what we need more of. And so I like that. I like this story, and I hope it happens.
Amazing. James, launches?
Let's hit the launches. So first up is from our friends at InMotion. So InMotion, We had One Wheel On. We had Kyle from One Wheel On a couple weeks ago. Emotion is, an incredible company when they've come out with what they call the new V13 Challenger, which goes, and Julia, I really wanted to ask you if you were going to ride on this unicycle, because it is a
It's
top
a unicycle?
speed. Yeah, it's a unicycle. So they're amazing.
Not
But
for
the top
me.
speed is 87 miles per hour. It has a 4,500 watt motor, which I have no idea how you'd have that much power between your feet.
Looks goofy as shit. Yeah.
And 87 miles per hour though, which is just, like
No,
Luke said, you got to be brave to
absolutely
ride this
not.
thing.
Absolutely not.
It also has a
87
great
miles?
124 miles. So like you can go for a while on this thing. And at a very high speed, it appears. So yeah, I was just wondering, would you be on?
No, no. I mean, it looks super goofy. It looks super goofy. And unless I'm going to be like in a superhero movie and I like need some transport that's not like flying around, absolutely not. I'm probably not going to do this. I mean, 87 miles, let me give kudos where kudos are due, which is this is kind of incredible that they have a unicycle that goes 87 miles per hour. And I would like to see it get to 87 miles per hour and also maybe like, I don't know, race a Cybertruck in the first 10 seconds to see who can go faster, or 5 seconds or 1 second, even. I think would be really interesting, but no, you're not going to see them beyond this. Electric motorcycle, yes. Electric unicycle, no.
Okay. Yeah. Well, there's an amazing photo I'll share of this guy on a one wheel here at Encinitas on a lawn chair. He like put a lawn chair on his one wheel and was cruising it down the road. And I randomly saw him.
That's more my speed. Yeah.
It was so cool. It looked amazing. It's like, what is underneath him? How is he cruising like that? And it was a one wheel underneath a lawn chair, which was incredible. But actually, let's stay in the world of like kind of goofy, but would you ride it? And I wanted to go to real quickly. Sorry, I've lost it here because I'm going out of order. Okay, yeah. So UK-based Northern Light Motors has a new line of recumbent bikes, which if you want to talk about maybe not the coolest look, Oliver and I were on our favorite vehicles at Eurobike were by far the recumbent bikes. Now, again, I would rather you not shoot me on one.
No.
They are so fun. But Northern Light is taking this angle on recumbent bikes, which is maybe if we make them look like sort of quasi Formula One race cars, like especially a more traditional Formula One, that'll be like fun and sexy and cool. And it can have a cockpit, a protective shield, and maybe even like a better flag to the challenge with a lot of recumbents is you're seeing very low, which makes it feels cool, but it also feels a little dangerous for other people seeing you. So they've come out with this new line of recumbents that has, a certain design aesthetic to it. I assume to make it a little bit cooler to ride. So Julia, first off, am I going to find you on a recumbent, normal recumbent? And then what do you think of these Northern Light recumbents?
Oh, no, you're not going to find me on a normal recumbent, although I would try it. And I agree that maybe in like the, light of darkness and without any cameras around, like I would just delight in being on a recumbent bike. What I do think about the Northern Light design is honestly, it looks a little gimmicky to me. Like I don't understand what the purpose is of trying to look like a Formula One vehicle, especially if you're going to be a recumbent bike. And it reminds me a bit of like a go-kart or like a soapbox thing. No, go-kart, soap cart, whatever those things are called, go-kart. And so I don't know. Like, whereas I could get behind light electric vehicles and other types of even three-wheelers, like I'm not sure I can get behind this. It just seems gimmicky to me.
Yeah, I agree. I think the recumbent you've got to try. The recumbent has a real challenge on its head because it is it's the best ride in all of micro, I think.
Really? How?
Yes.
Just what is it? The turning radius? Like I just don't understand.
It feels so cool. Like when you get going on a recumbent, wind in the hair, you got like
you don't have that much
nice
here.
Cup holder. Like it's just incredible. So
it's gonna be James's neighbor on the one wheel with a lawn chair and then James in a recumbent.
100%. Like just in a retirement community, that's how I'm gonna go. Like right, just like that. It's gonna be great. So yeah, shout out to recumbents though. You do have a brand image problem. We got to figure it out. We're not sure Northern Light is the one that's going to do it here. Okay, Julia, we're going to flip over again here and have a little fun. So a couple like quirky things out of the micro world. One is a YouTuber, kind of outdoor enthusiast, Jack Stewart, who has built the world's tiniest cabin And of course, why would he build the tiniest cabin in the world? It'd be so he doesn't have to tow it behind, his F-150. He's towing it behind his electric bike. Kind of cool, kind of fun. How do you feel? This is not the first tiny cabin we've covered in like the newsletter. Like, there's a lot of this going down now where people are trying to
What
build.
a sentence to say. This is not the first tiny cabin.
This is not the first tiny cabin. These pods are becoming a thing, I feel like. So, are you going to buy a tiny cabin anytime soon? Can you imagine? I can see this in Silver Lake. You can go up to the mountains. You can't.
I could see it in California for sure. Yeah. Camping in Silver Lake, just in the hills of Silver Lake, the forest of Griffith Park. Yeah, maybe I could do that. I'd certainly go to the beach. Honestly, this is like a goofy that I can get behind because I think it serves a purpose in terms of, what it's trying to do. The cabin itself looks a little heavy, so I'm not sure how it actually would ride. But this is one of the reasons why I originally got into micromobility, because people are weird and they just like do things according to their own taste. And so if there's even one guy who likes to have a little cabin that he just tows behind in his bike, I'm down. I'm good with it.
Okay, well, shout out Jake. Sorry, or Jax. Julia thinks you're weird. I think you're perfect. So nothing you're doing here is weird. But here is something that's weird. So this is from the file, interesting but not recommended. A university student in England has used disposable vape batteries from eBay to power his electric scooter. So he had this kind of bet going on. He said, I bet I could use these disposable vape batteries. I could put them together in my scooter and I could drive. Now, in the world we have a lot of challenges with batteries and micromobility. Let's just first off say we do not advise anyone actually do this. But he has done this and it does seem to work. So I don't know what this is. Some weird recycling program, Julia. Is this something?
Is this a vehicle launches section, or like what are we doing here? This is like
who knows? This could be this could be a new business model.
Vehicle launches to like now we're just like in the realm of the absurd. Like we need a Rider's Choice Award category that's just like what is the most absurd micromobility vehicle that has been created. I think that this would go in that category, but no, you're not got somebody who does disposable vape batteries and uses it to power an e-scooter, and then they like launch this vehicle commercially. I really applaud this person who I don't, if it's going to graduate uni or not. It seems like maybe he's got a career as an entrepreneur or as somebody who thinks about the circular economy. Yeah, circular economy. I'm going to go with circular economy. I'm going to give this guy some credit. But yeah, no, this feels like vehicle launches. We've now departed from that.
Oh, wow. Okay. Not on theme. I got to go back on theme. Sorry for all the people out there. These are some of the most clicked on links in our newsletters, by the way.
I know. They're actually pretty amazing. This is pretty amazing. This is pure entertainment.
But let's get back to the vehicle launches as Julia has requested. So two out there, two titans of the bicycle industry appear to actually being serious about e-bikes. And we've covered this a little bit in the past, but Specialized is out with their new Globe Haul LT. So they already came out with the Globe Haul. The LT has the long tail, which of course is probably the most popular type of cargo bike in the US. The Rad Power 4, Rad Power as like the example, Rad Cargo Power 4 as the example. That's probably the best selling. This is coming at a price point of $3,500, which is good, I think, for Specialized. They were criticized a little bit for the global haul price. So this is a little bit lower. And it looks like it's got all the bells and whistles of Specialized. The other one, probably the bigger news, though, out of the cargo world was the Cannondale. So Cannondale came out with the Cargo Wagon and the Wonder Wagon Neo. One is a front-loading cargo. The other is a long-tail cargo. The front-loading cargo, unfortunately, is not going to be out in the U.S. I think this is Cannondale not thinking the U.S. people want this. This is unfortunate because I feel like there's not enough front-loading cargoes in the U.S. like you see so much of in the prevalence in Europe. But yeah, there's another one with all the high-end components you'd expect from Cannondale. And, they're really going for it. I feel like they're, dedicating their website to this and really great videos and great marketing. I feel like they've done for these launches. So it's great to see them get more serious about electric bikes and not just putting batteries on their, and motors on their traditional bikes. So yeah, Julia, not sure if you have a thought here, but Specialized in Canada.
Yeah, I'm kind of bored. This is the news story that bores me. I feel like every time, it's almost every week that we're like, finally, the big guys are getting really serious about this. And like, they don't put out anything that's that interesting or at scale. I mean, looking at these bikes, I think these are bikes that are super functional, that hopefully people will adopt. Finally, they're at more palatable prices, although I think they still need to continue to drop that. I'm actually pretty disappointed that they're not doing a front-facing cargo bike or whatever it's called in the US. So I think this is my turn to be bored. I'm just like ready for them to do something that's a little bit more ambitious, or at the very least, like a lower price point so that they can get broader adoption. And then I would love to see it. But for right now, I'm like, fine.
Okay.
Whatever.
Try again.
I'd rather have a vape-powered scooter or like the world's tiniest cabin.
Okay. There we go. You're converting now. We have a whole new launch category. And then finally, shout out to our friends down here in San Diego from Juice Bikes. We had Tori Harris on the podcast a couple months ago. Now they just released the Scorpion X2, their electric moped, they say. But this is also, kind of in the moto style, 1,000-watt motor, big motor. But this is meant to ride as a class 3 e-bike. So it's not meant to ride as a moped as far as I know. Now there could be some trickery going on here in the app, but I'm not sure if that's actually happening. But they did release it, and it's good to see they hadn't released a vehicle for a little while. So it's nice to see that they've got this new vehicle out there. And, Tora is one of the OGs in the space. So it's always interesting to see what they're making next.
Do we do a giveaway on this, James?
We did a giveaway, not on this vehicle, but with Juiced, yes.
Okay. All right. Be great to do a giveaway on this vehicle. This is another one where I'll put my hat in the rank. That's a very good looking bike.
Absolutely. I agree. All right, Julia, that's it for launches.
Very sure. Nothing else weird that you want to share about, launches or whatever?
Yeah, there's more. We had to cut the news a lot. So once we get back into a normal scheduled program, you will definitely, we'll get some weirdness in there for sure. But yeah, awesome. Now we're over to Patrick. Talk to Patrick Wirth today. Are you ready?
Ready to talk to Patrick.
Okay, ride on. Let's go talk to Patrick.
Today on Ride On, James and I have a very special guest on the show, Patrick Wirth. So Patrick, welcome. Patrick is the VP of Mobility at Baloise Group. Baloise, if you haven't heard of it before, is a European insurance company that's headquartered in Basel, Switzerland. The company was founded in the 1800s, 1863 to be exact, and it offers a range of insurance and pension solutions as well as investment products. But Patrick, and the reason we're having him on the show is not necessarily to talk about insurance, although honestly, that's probably something that's underreported on in the micromobility space. But it's actually to talk about the new group that he heads up in venture capital. It is really, really cool to see an insurance company get into VC and take a very different approach, or what we think is going to be a very different approach. And Patrick, you'll have to tell us, to not only investing, but also the ongoing relationship that companies have with an insurance company. So welcome, Patrick. We're very, very glad to have you here. Patrick, maybe you could start with just telling us about your role at Baloise and some of the investments you've made to date.
Yeah, super. Thanks a lot, Julia, for the introduction, and happy to be here. Just quickly to Baloise. So Baloise, as you said, is an insurance company, but we are heavily investing in mobility. So we decided a few years ago that the insurance space is undergoing a very deep change. And this is not triggered only by the insurance world. It's triggered by changes around us. And this is in mobility very significant. So you see the mega trends we will mention later, which influence mobility and influence a lot the ownership of a car, which is a core business of insurance since a long, long time. So we decided to go into mobility, and not only as a VC, as you said, we would like to build something sustainable, long-term, with strategic impact to what we do today, but also build a new business line. That's our purpose and idea in mobility.
Very interesting, Patrick. And maybe let's just start with the basics. How does insurance differ for auto mobility versus micromobility? I mean, as Baloise is looking at automobiles versus as Baloise is looking at, e-bike companies, et cetera. Just, again, from the basics, how does insurance differ?
This is not an easy question to answer. It sounds so easy, but it depends how you define a car. So a car insurance, sorry for saying that. But you have the classical ownership of a car. Everybody knows you You buy a car, you have an insurance, and that's it. But if you already go to car sharing, then it's even closer to a bike sharing, because then you have different users, it's short-term renting, you have new data points for risk calculations, and that already goes then in the gray zone to say we are already at the bike sharing sector or e-scooter, because these are completely different risks you have to calculate with different data, and that makes it difficult because we don't have a history of 100 years. We can build on our risk models. We have to come up with new stuff. And now imagine what is a premium if you rent out an e-bike. This is super tiny, small amounts. And now invest a lot of money into data models, automatization, and all that stuff, and embedded insurance. This is really a challenge. So we are still learning, but that comes also with the car sharing. So it's not only bike versus car, it's the ownership model, which is most important.
Yeah, Patrick, I know that was a little bit of a dorky in the weeds question, but for me, that's actually really interesting because my background, I come from the mayor's office in LA. And when I was at the mayor's office was when the scooter boom was happening in LA and in the surrounding SoCal area. And what we found is that from a regulatory perspective, we had to ask scooter providers to get $5 million of insurance coverage. There was one company that was able to provide that insurance for the scooter companies, and it was Lloyd's out of London. And so it ended up being a huge barrier to these scooter companies to being able to operate in LA because of this insurance company. So again, I know it's a little bit of a dorky question, and for some of our audience, they're going to be like, why are you talking about insurance? But I think it's actually super important. And the point you just made about automobility and the fact that we have 100 years of data versus micromobility and that we don't, I think is very, very interesting. So Patrick, let's talk a little bit about what you're doing with venture capital. It's weird to have a VC out of an insurance company. No, I mean, how does your thesis change because you're a VC at an insurance company?
That's a quite good question, and we have to be careful to use the term VC when we talk to our management, because we are not a classical VC, as you said. So as a CVC, I would say we are closer to that, but we are taking more shares of the ventures. Why do we do that? So we use the VC approach. We're looking for the best teams in the world who are fitting into our thesis with growth potential, but we are not the best partner for unicorns, I would say. What has changed is when we look at what we do, that we really look what kind of assets we can combine. Assets from the Baloise core business with our client access, for example, or with the ventures to support each other. So for us, it's much more important. So coming from the VC industry, my background is, parts of it at least, it's not investing into company, being in the board and hope to get to the highest valuation, have an exit. It is supporting much more combined stuff, have this in the due diligence process already included. How can we make this venture much more successful? And this is the most important difference when we talk to founders, that we would like to support, but it's not the classical VC case, make in 3 years the best exit. Is a long-term relationship, and we try to combine product services to make customers happier. That's different to a classical VC.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And to me, that also sort of speaks to maybe the risk averseness of being at an insurance company and wanting to make sure that the startups that you're investing in are helped along the way and are successful in the long term. So Patrick, let me ask this last question, and then I'll turn it over to James to ask some questions too. But what types of investments have you made to date?
I've just learned, Julia, that you really what you're talking about to the things you just mentioned. But what kind of investments have you done? So we have in our portfolio, so far we have done 12 investments. We are focused on Europe. So the ventures must have a business in Europe. In best case, in one of the countries, we are very active in the insurance market also. It is service-driven stuff. Software is in our focus. We are not the best partner when it comes to hardware development, manufacturing. So we have invested in peer-to-peer car sharing in Gomor. We have invested in parking solutions, Parkandi, for example. We have something in the electric mobility space, which is but also a service data-driven company, which is called Tronity, which is operating in 44 countries already worldwide, but with a focus on Europe. So we have several investments in different domains, as said, driven by the megatrends of electrification, sharing, and all that. But not hardware. And autonomous, for example, is for us nothing we invest now, because as said, we would like to bring assets to the table. And we're looking at the autonomous driving, of course, a lot, but this is too far away for us, so it doesn't make sense to invest.
Interesting. Interesting. Yeah, James and I would debate. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, no, interesting. I think James and I would debate too on that. How far away are we from autonomy, and probably have different answers. We talk about that quite a lot.
Yeah, Patrick. So, I think a lot of our listeners would be interested or in, positions inside of big companies, and they might want to hear from you. How do you actually go about starting what I guess you call a CVC inside of a company, that has so much history, 160 years old? What does that pitch look like? How do you get the resources to actually start something like that inside of such a big, entrenched company in a very specific industry? I think a lot of people would want to know how you did that and what that looks like.
That's quite interesting that you ask that. I'm just have to smile when I listen to you, because it was just a battle, but finally we got there. At the beginning, it was a decision from the top management. So there was a new strategic phase, and Baloise decided we have to invest more into diversify the business we have today. That was the cornerstone, let's say, and then we build on that. We defined goals. So what does it mean we would like to diversify the insurance business? What are the ambitions we have there? And then we had the freedom to develop a way to that goals, and we have defined in KPIs until 2025. That is the first time horizon milestone we have. Then we pitched, how can we get there? What amounts do we need? Is Baloise willing to take this long-term investment period? It was 2019 at these days. And finally, it was convincing enough that we said, hey, if you would like to get there, we have a plan. It looks like that. It's based on all the learnings we have had the years before with the VC we have. We still have a classical VC, CVC, based on the innovation stuff we did, based on the analysis of different domains. Is it in living? Is it in health? Is it in mobility? Yeah, we then convinced the top management in several iterations to agree that this is a good idea, helps Baloise to stay significant and relevant enough for the future.
Amazing. In terms of your capital structure, did you raise any outside capital, or is this all sort of supported? Your only LP is, of course, the company itself.
We have been asked from externals if they can invest, but currently the setting is clearly that we have a single LP. This is Baloise. So it's not doable that someone else invests, and we still proceed with that because, again, our goal is to establish a new business line in mobility for Baloise, which is a bit of a conflict if we take external money. Nevertheless, some ask us really to invest, which is, of course, quite nice.
Yeah, of course. So to talk about the thesis that you laid out there, you mentioned the mega trends really being electrification and maybe even sharing mobility in urban areas. Sounds like two areas that you're very focused on. How do you think? I'm very curious how you think about where you might invest in, say, more of a traditional electrification model. That could be the electrification of cars versus what I think is getting at a little bit more your thesis, which is like how cities will really transform to be, more climate friendly, to be, better places to basically live and work in less congested ways. So I'm curious with that in mind, how what types of companies would you be looking at specifically as it relates to electrification and shared that might be different than, people thinking, okay, here's another company investing in, electric cars, let's say.
Yeah. So this is a question which I can answer now half an hour, but I try to make it really short and to focus on very specific areas. What we have observed in cities is the car is a problem. It takes a lot of space, pollution, all that stuff, that. If you have electric cars, at least we can do something on the pollution. Nevertheless, it takes a lot of space. So to make a city more lovely to live in, maybe we need less cars, or at least less cars on the streets parking. And this is something we have in mind when we invested, for example, in the peer-to-peer car sharing, what I just said. This is partially electrification, but it's also classical cars. Nevertheless, at the end, we would like to reduce cars in the city. Less cars means better quality of life, and finally leads into higher value of living there. And just two examples, I said GoMore is a company operating in 6 European countries. It's a peer-to-peer car sharing platform. And they got to the point that a car is not used only 1 day per month. If you condense it to all, it is at least more days used a month. And that means people get rid of a car, you have less cars in the city, and they are much better utilized. Another element we put there is the parking area. So how can we bring cars from the street parking to other limited space maybe, but still free? And there we have Pacandi. It's a company we own already, which offers to open up spaces which are behind a barrier. And so people don't have to drive around to find a parking lot. And the utilization of parking lots which are behind an area are much higher. So two things which finally should reduce the number of cars in a city, which is maybe on the short term the most promising thing we can do.
Yep. In terms of just reading a little bit more about your thesis, so one thing I think you've said is this idea of trying to make the car a less attractive option in a city, and of course that can come in a lot of ways, through regulation and things like that. But I'm curious, just your own opinion, like again, studying technology and studying, what power laws and kind of what ends up winning. It's often not the case that a less attractive option wins with the customer. And again, maybe in many situations, I think shared is often framed as a less attractive option. How do you think that changes over time? How do we make some of the investment, some of the things that we know are so key to shared mobility actually more attractive than the car? Or do you think it's like you're betting on maybe the government coming in and making it just way less attractive for a car to be bought? I'm just curious how you think about that specifically.
Yeah. James, may I ask you a question?
Yes, of course.
Do you like to drive a car?
Well, no, not really, but I wouldn't say I'm a normal person in that respect. I don't have a problem with driving, but I prefer riding, which would be what I consider most of my electric bikes and other small modes.
But that's quite interesting. So we don't have to convince you that you don't need a car. You should use more your bike or other modes of transportation. So you are not a person, you maybe have a car, I don't know exactly, but you are not a person saying it's so comfortable, I cannot live without a car. It looks like not, but so what is because you start with, do we have to convince the people to not use a car, or is it even by we have to tell them you're not allowed, or there are toll system in cities like London, you have to pay much more. So it's a luxury if you can drive into a city. I think it's a mix of both. We must have attractive alternatives. So if you just talk about bikes, if a city is prepared that biking is super nice, I just spent a day in Copenhagen in Europe, in Denmark, and the city is super well prepared for biking. They have highways for bikes even, so that you really can drive quite fast on these ones with e-bikes, classical bikes or cargo bikes. So if a city is prepared like that, it is fun to have your bike and not take the car. If I think about other cities in Europe, they are not prepared for bikes. There you are happy if you arrive where you would like to go by car and not got killed. Then, of course, maybe the car is much more attractive. So it's really how make the alternatives to a car as attractive as possible. Public transportation, shared mobility, bike usage, or whatever it is, that must be so attractive that you say, staying around with my car in a traffic jam is not any longer interesting for me. That would be my answer to that. And that is the regulator maybe the city is quite important what they do in this direction.
And do you, I'm curious as of course, a group with a lot of, I assume a lot of influence and power, like do you feel an active responsibility as an insurance company to help with some of the lobbying efforts that are so important for some of these companies that just don't have nearly the lobbying capabilities to gather infrastructure, to create, for instance, here's a good one. I noticed a lot of people in Europe lately that are in our community have talked about bike theft as a really big problem. It's a problem here in the US too, but it also is in Europe. Like, do you, so for instance, one of the things that I've seen proposed is we should treat, at least in the US, I'm not sure exactly the penal codes in Europe, but one argument is we should treat e-bike theft as car theft. So it's a felony, it's not a misdemeanor. Right now, if you steal a bike, it's a misdemeanor, slap on the wrist. You steal a car, it's grand theft auto, generally comes as a felony. And of course, the fines and the penalties are much higher. Like, are there things like that you can imagine? Of course, you have a ton of data on how you think about risk modeling and how you ensure risk modeling. But yeah, I'd be curious if that's a big pitch to the startup. Like, let's help you actually think about regulation. Let's help you think about how we can lobby the government on your behalf. Is that part of your services?
In all honesty, I would love to say yes, but in all honesty, that's quite quite difficult. You know it. You need a lot of resources to do that. It's a long-term game to change really something. What I can say, via the ventures we invested into, we have access and some kind of influence to some cities. So we bought our way in, I would say. Vanmoof is a company based in Paris and London who is doing mobility services, data collection, and then offer mobility services to cities. They have a very close relationship to some of the biggest cities in Europe. Gomor I mentioned. So they are super close to the cities they are in and thinking about how can we make the city nicer when it comes to mobility. Let's frame it like that. So, and then we support. Do we open doors because we as Baloise have a lot of access? That's not the case, but our headquarter, for example, is in Switzerland, in Basel. And there, of course, we are super close to the city because we are a big player. In the cities, we are, as a insurance, quite active and have a branch or an office, a big one. There we have good connections, but in the others, in all honesty, it's quite difficult to have impact.
Makes sense. And then maybe before I also send it over to Julie after this one, one question this year, again, maybe a little more US-centric understanding of what's happening. But, one thing that we've seen a lot of is venture capital is really fleeing the quote-unquote micromobility space and transforming city space where around small electric vehicles. That's primarily coming out of some really bad returns. So it's like, I think Bird has raised around $900 million in institutional VC. They're worth, I think yesterday I saw a tweet that they're worth $13 million. This is the same for companies like Hellbiz and Marty. I mean, just, I would say losses of capital that we haven't seen maybe since the .com bust. And so in the US, you hear a lot of people talking about like, oh, we're going to write off the entire space, right? Oftentimes you hear VCs are pack animals. They run together. They seek momentum together. And so in the US, like it's gone. It's almost like it's people stay away from it. I'm curious, one, if those headlines impact your day-to-day at all, and maybe two, if you feel more internal pressure to try to explain your thesis more, because some of the companies that, of course, dominate the headlines have really maybe soured it for everyone else. And I'm just curious if that's the case for you, or maybe that's a little different in Europe.
No, it's not different in Europe. Definitely not. What you described is a bit black and white. So I would not say it's rid of the whole concept of shared mobility. There are successful players. We have insights. Sorry, I mentioned it again. Gomor is shared mobility, and they are quite successful. They are close to profitability. They will be profitable quite soon. So I think this is a success model. They have more than 3 million members, so it's not a tiny one. But as you said, we have examples where the trigger has been to be successful, to grow at all costs. Is this the issue of the mobility domain? No, we see it everywhere, I would say, in all industries now, in the startup industries, in different domains, and there has been a lot of money. And if someone would like to spend money because money was cheap and it was difficult to have any kind of return in other domains, so why not invest into startups? And that was, of course, a hype. You know it better than I know if you look at the numbers. And this is not only related to mobility. So as said, we see it all over the place. Some are failing. Exactly, the flagships, maybe even the prominent ones, which collected a lot of money, the unicorns. But I know more than one example, which are great positive examples of being profitable quite soon and have a robust business. That guides me to your second question. Does it has any impact on us to argue a bit more internally when it comes to the investment decisions and the management? Yes. Of course, we have been asked, hey, how's it going with our portfolio? Do we have some issues with the Silicon Valley Bank? Of course, there was a question, hey, what is the impact? But nevertheless, our thesis is more focused maybe not only on the unicorns, more on the 5 to 8 year period to get to profitability. That was from the beginning. So it has not changed a lot, I would say, on our individual investment thesis and how we act.
Really interesting, and really interesting again to think about your investment thesis and how it might differ or be the same from other VCs. Patrick, I'm going to make a couple of comments because you said so many good things before I ask you a question, but just a couple of comments on some of the things that you said. First of all, about your point on how you have to make other options more attractive than the car. Yes, this is exactly the point. I think a lot of people miss this point too, where they think you have to make being in a car less attractive. Actually, I think it's that you have to make other mobility options more attractive. One of the ways in which we saw that in LA and in my work, in my day job at Rocky Mountain Institute, or RMI, is we talk a lot about avoid, shift, and electrify. So avoid being the idea of having land use where we build housing next to places that you tend to go, or vice versa, things that you tend to go to next to housing. Shift in the way that you have to have people shift to mobility options that are, again, more attractive than the car, not the car being less attractive. And then finally, electrify everything else. So that's point one. I think you're spot on about making mobility options more attractive than the car. The second thing I wanted to to talk a little bit about is just this point about pricing and about really embedding externalities into cars and thinking about how we price cars and even electric cars differently based on weight, based on the size of the car, based on the land space. So I think, you not only have to do this avoid, shift, electrify, it really is about pricing. So now that I've gotten off of my soapbox and back into questions, one of the things, Patrick, I did want to talk about just briefly is, at other VCs, I understand the deal flow can be like 3,000 companies a year. They might look at 40 seriously and 4 they really make investments in. What does your deal flow look like, and how many investments do you tend to make per year?
Is more or less exactly the metrics you mentioned.
Oh, really? Okay, interesting.
Yeah, we are a bit limited, let's say, because our thesis is a bit more narrowed, as said. So we're looking not at 3,000, it's more 2,000, I would say. We look carefully at, 40 is a good number, 30 to 40 per year. And we do something between 2 to 4 new investments per year. Of course, follow-on investments, we are quite interested. As said, it's a long-term game we are playing here. So we have 2 to 4 new ones per year. So that's the metrics fits quite well. And this is how we pitched it internally. We would like to use the VC logic, build a portfolio, because some ventures will fail. We have some of these, but others will be successful. So we need a broad portfolio to be finally, on the long run, successful. So we have more or less the same metrics.
Interesting. Okay, maybe 2 more questions from me, Patrick, and then we'll go ahead and close this out. So the first is, do you have peers at other insurance companies? Are there other VCs at other insurance companies?
You mean doing the same?
Yeah.
Not so many. From an outside perspective, if you ask insurance companies, hey, where are you focusing outside your core domain of insurance? Very often you hear mobility. Around the home is very often health, of course. But mobility is mentioned, I think, 30% of the time. Insurance companies says, we're investing into mobility. The most important point is you have to look into the details. So how do they do that? What is their motivation? What effort do they put into it? What kind of investments? And there we don't have really one company in Europe which is doing the same. Luckily, there are some worldwide we can talk with, get learnings, share learnings, and it gives us the comfort that we are not really on the completely wrong way. Because if you're the only one doing something, it might be not the best thing. But we have some, in Canada is one doing it, in South Africa, in China, of course, which is a different environment. Nevertheless, you can learn a lot. So there are some, but it's not so many from the insurance industry trying the same way we do it.
Very interesting. All right, so final question, Patrick, and then we'll let you go. We do have a lot of startups who listen to this podcast. And so my question for you is, as you're looking across your deal flow, as you're looking across your deals, where is the gap? Like, what kind of company would you like to see in existence or come to you? And how should people get in touch with you?
So every company which is something between, I would say, seed, could be sometimes even pre-seed, and a Series A, Series B would be nice. Later on, it might be tricky for us to be the best investor. As said, in the service domains and digital scalabilities, must have some business in Europe at least. Much more specific, we are looking into fleet management, fleet electrification. Transition is something we are super interested currently. We are doing deep dives in that domain. Tele-driving stuff, it's not autonomous, but maybe a bridge solution we are looking into. So very specific, these things we are quite interested. But again, everything which is service, around bikes, cars, whatever it is, and scalable in Europe would be absolutely nice. How to reach out? We have a nice website, so you can look at that one. Baloise Mobility you can find. On LinkedIn you can find me personally, I'm more than happy if you reach out there. And on all other channels, you will find Baloise too. And finally, it will find the way to me. I'm more than positive about that.
Amazing.
Patrick,
well, Patrick, thank you so much.
One more, Julia. So, Patrick, as an entrepreneur, I'm just curious, maybe a bit of a U.S.-centric question, but I remember when my previous company raised a lot of money from more traditional VCs, Sequoia, GGV, Capital, others. We were looking to take a big investment from Unilever Ventures, so a CVC, a corporate VC, and it was very hard to get the VCs around the table to agree to that. Especially here in the U.S., there's a lot of stigma, I think, around corporate VCs when you have already raised from traditional VCs. And of course, we were able to get that over the finish line because there was such a large investment in our core product as part of the strategic or corporate investment. So I'm just curious to the founders out there who are hearing, don't take corporate VC, what's your 30-second pitch on why that's not the case and why you're the best partner for them?
We are the best partner because we are following the VC strategy, so company first. It's quite important for us that the venture has all the freedom to execute. We have no special clauses and to limit the growth. That's quite important. What we additionally bring to a VC beside money is really strategic values. So we can give you access to clients. We have a data in the cloud service which you can use. We have marketing agencies supporting us and you. So we have much more to give than only money. Nevertheless, we are open for every kind of VC investment in the future. So we are quite flexible. So I think we are a good addition to classical VC investment.
That's great, and I do agree with that. I think that stigma is wrong, at least again here in the U.S. And so I think just as a personal experience working with Unilever and their investment team was great. So I think what you can offer is tremendously valuable. So as Julia said, thank you, Patrick, for coming on, and we look forward to seeing you. If not at Micromobility America, or I don't know if any of your colleagues are making it next month, definitely at Micromobility Europe next year.
Super. Thanks a lot, James and Julia.
Great.
Thank you.
Have a great day.